join us. This is day 4 of the London Startup Village. We're talking everything about DePin today. So decentralized infrastructure, how you're able to build new then types of coordination layers between people and create some very awesome pieces of technology. We've been spotlighting some really cool projects here today at the gallery. We've got Hivemapper, Render, Dawn, a bunch of really cool teams. And I'm excited to be joined here today by Lucas from Ncorp and talk to us a little bit about how they're being able to apply DePin to climate and being able to make some real impact of how this technology, the blockchain, which we've been colloquially referring to like a shared database. I'm really trying to avoid saying crypto or blockchain, and then it is, and like lingo that makes sense. And so the idea of DePin just allows us to utilize the shared database to create a lot more infrastructure, so physical devices that are able to create new networks and new ways of being able to generate and create different types of online infrastructure. And so you guys have been tackling a lot into that in the climate, which is incredibly important. So I'm excited to be able to dive into everything around that. But before we begin, Lucas, why don't you just give everyone like a short little introduction about yourself, and then we'll first ask the question of like, what is DePin and from your perspective, what it is.
All right. Thank you, Cap. Yeah, my name is Lucas. Software distributed systems engineer, and I've been working across immersive industries and blockchain for my professional career. And now I'm a co-founder of a startup called Ncorp, and we're focused on climate guardianship. How can we use new technology to have better awareness of our climate, and how can we create forcing functions for the economy to account for the effects of our impact on climate without slowing down the acceleration of humanity and technology.
Yeah. And like it's incredibly important. Like I think you guys are at like the frontier of this type of technology, being able to do it. And I think you touched on like a really nice point there of we want to be able to help improve the environment, but not limit innovation and not limit our kind of growth, but they need to go hand in hand. And it's these type of frontier technologies that kind of create the opportunities of new ways of being able to operate within that. And so let's just like dive into like a little bit more of the climate guardianship and like how you're seeing that start to then come to fruition, and a little bit more about how that actually then works.
I think that, it's using these technologies to look at the biggest problems we're facing from a new angle, and what that kind of unlocks is, I think it's our duty. And when you're looking at a problem at the scale of climate, one of the biggest issues is just orchestration, because you need a picture of the Earth at all times. And the Earth is a complicated place. It's hard for people to get along. But having Web3 and systems where trust can be taken out of the hands of humans, and we can have these systems that are able to operate across the globe without the need for intervention is a big kind of unlock. So having systems that can observe and make that climate data a public good to everyone around the world is, I think, a necessary step towards just being able to quantify even the effects going on in climate. We need to be able to track our progress if we're trying to deploy technology to reduce carbon, or even putting in legislation to try and become greener. How do we even measure the effects of that? We can't even start if we don't have a good system to quantify, and it's an orchestration issue.
And so a lot of what the initial idea of the DePin side of it is being able to help collect that data and to be able to allow us a trustless and permissionless way in which we can be able to coordinate all the data collection from across into like a single source, which like as the blockchain is like a shared database, can be that source of truth in order to have that. And then utilizing that data, there's a lot more creative things that could be built on top of it in order to then generate these outcomes that we're looking at.
I think many people kind of are maybe a little ignorant to the issue of, when you're working in these kind of future systems, the systems themselves run and are trusted and decentralized. But if the data that is being put onto them isn't also, then they're basically worthless, because you can just manipulate the inputs. And really, the biggest thing about DePin is that the DePin is unlocking, from my perspective, is that ability to have the trusted data, and that's through, as we've been working on decentralized satellite downlink. That's just, we can use the recent cryptographic technology to, prove exactly where that data has come from, the sources, and then its entire life as it gets used and processed down the line. And this is going to bleed over to other things, like AI and training data. It's the same technology under the hood. So, we're really focused on climate and trying to solve that problem. But, these unlocks in DePin are, across many industries. And I think people are just starting to see that.
Is there any you're tapping onto the climate side,
Mhm.
and you talk about how DePin's been a very big power in like verifying the data. So the models and receiving them are able to have like good inputs, so you're then able to get good outputs towards it. Is there anyone else in the ecosystem that you're quite excited to see building and kind of really pioneering that kind of DePin space?
Well, I think it's honestly still really early. I think we have a few hurdles to get past in the industry before the really exciting stuff happens. But another super team company you mentioned, Don, like they have just a really good application of being able to distribute um, broadband access, decentralized in places that don't have big ISP culture. That's really exciting. I think in DePin, it's right now it's difficult to uh, kind of raise funding for just collecting data because people, we haven't quite, in climate, we haven't quite crossed the precipice where there's still a lot of public data available and people are like, well, why don't I just use this? I'm not going to pay, for different data. But just yesterday it was announced that climate.gov, one of the biggest climate websites in the world and trusted sources, is being shut down. 18 of the satellites that have been sending down this data publicly are going offline within the next year or so, and there will be no public broadcasted climate data. It will all be in private, and very soon that's going to become a pain point. And I think when we start to feel that pain and that ripple, DePin is going to be it's going to just click to a lot of people because it will become necessary. But for now, projects like Dawn, you know, anyone just kind of piggybacking IoT and broadband single, these are like entry level use cases that are proven and just useful because you don't need to build all the infrastructure that exists, and you don't need to set up companies in different nations and deal with all the different headaches that come with that. But I think for now, I'm mostly excited at what we're seeing under the hood that's going to be coming in the next few years.
And you touched on a good point there, where if there's not the public sources of data that are available, because traditionally they're like public goods, and how do you fund a public good? Well, it's like government-esque funding. It's like these and types of goods which are collected from the group, like we've all co-funded to create these then types of places. And right now, it's not like a smooth process per se of being able to fund those collectives. Whereas when we introduce blockchain technology and how you can own your assets and you can pay people directly, you can now easily crowdsource these then types of funding. But then with DePin, you can now like proper business cases of why, well, you want to buy one of the devices so that you can provide the data and be rewarded for the data that you provide. And because you're getting the device, which then verifies it and knows that's high quality data being distributed, then that public data set is then verified and backed by, yes, this is the high quality data that you're looking for, that anybody now can access. And everybody's been rewarded for their contribution towards it. So you switch from I'm going to pay taxes and my tax pot is then going to go to pay for these public goods, rather as like, I'm going to help contribute towards it. I'm going to get the device and I'm going to provide the data that then collectively can come together in order to create the public good overall.
Yeah, I absolutely. And NCorp, we're like very focused on bringing those primitives into, the base level of our economic systems, and that's like the awesome thing about programmable money. And when you have data points, you can create, and they're proven, you can create economies around them because people can trust them. So you can collect data, you can be rewarded, and as long as the um, the economic system is there to take that data, track it, and prove that it's being used. And that is, I think, still somewhere where the only easy way to talk about it is like to talk about the more degenerate areas of blockchain. So if you look at meme coins and kind of pump.fun, it's a very clear example of how just like an idea itself can support a whole economy. But if we can kind of transition and become more educated and take those ideas from being kind of silly things online to, can we have that, can the health be responsible for itself and have its own value that is secured by this data, and we're able to exchange economically with the health of the earth and give back and forth contributions, the healthier, the more sustainable we make the earth, while being able to accelerate technology. Again, both should benefit, and there's no reasons those primitives can't be built in, but it's going to be kind of a long journey. But without DePin and securing this data in a distributed way, none of that can be built.
And what kind of like got you initially like gun ho and like wanting to be able to like jump in and be able to run this? As a co-founder in the business, there's a lot of like personal sacrifice that has to go in, financial sacrifice has to go in order to be able to be pushing these kind of initiatives forward. What was your driving force for that?
Well, I'm not shy of trying to solve the biggest problems that we face. We as a society, I think we need more people with that mentality, or else it's not going to get done. Climate is the biggest. I was at a conference, a Web3 climate conference a few years ago in Amsterdam, and there was a lot of kind of economists and climate people, and came across this piece of information that there's an error in the market where the price of carbon isn't correctly priced. And most of the scientists agreed that if the capital flows were better filtered into the right areas of science, we really do have a chance at creating climate guardianship. But because the price of carbon isn't appropriately in the market, and an easy example of that is that oil should be more expensive if you account for how much governments have to pay to handle climate disaster. But as a kind of economist myself, looking at that as an opportunity, well, if there's an error in the market, no one's taken that market, I could be the first to that value. And so I try to think, how can I build a system that gets to that value before the market, and we can then take all of that and just give it to these people who have the answers. And once I got that idea that this was possible, and that being able to create economies around data points using trust systems, it's just an obsession, and I just want to make it happen.
Awesome. And is that then something where you guys, like, you're going through your journey now, right? Like you've been through a few different experiences. Like NCorp won in one of the previous Coliseum hackathons, was able to get the public good award there. You've been through a space accelerator in order to take you forward. Like, well, what has that journey been like, being able to build at NCorp to get to where you are now?
I mean, I got to shout out to Andrew, the co-founder, who's like stepped up and just brought it to a level I couldn't imagine. But
shout out Andrew.
Yeah, wish you were here. Hope everything's okay at the doctor's. But I started with I was like, this is going to take me a week or two. I'll make a token that's tied to the sea surface temperature, and then people can kind of gamble on the end of the world, like short the end of the world. It's a sticky thing. Everyone can understand it, and it can raise awareness, if nothing else. And through trying to write that quick program, we uncovered that actually just getting that data point is incredibly hard, and it takes all of the nations and the universities to collaborate and build satellites. And it just, then we peeked behind the curtain and saw, and I think it's it's been strange. It's hard to, necessarily get funding when we're so mission driven, but we also have just been focused on things that get it to ourselves. I think over the past few years of going through all these programs, working with Super Team, and really kind of polishing a little more that side of like, okay, you need some sort of revenue engine turning. I think, for a while we were an R&D company, and over the past few months we've like hit a go-to-market strategy, and I think it's sick. Just gonna do it. Yeah.
And what are you then pushing on now? Like what's the main position that you want to be able to get the project towards?
So what we're doing is that we've understood the really decrepit state of climate data, and how the kind of institutions are falling apart, and we've taken all these data sets and we kind of upgraded them to the most modern, fastest accessible. There's a data format called ZAR. We're using a really fast Rust library called Ice Chunk, and we're just making that data really, really fast and available. And now we're looking at data sets around the world that there's an arbitrage opportunity between climate and the actual price. So like the housing index in Miami, for example. And we're just using those data sets to trade on these markets to start that fund and raise the money. We've built a decentralized prediction market that is going to allow people to contribute and make that data set better. And as those mechanisms get more popular, as there's more value, we'll be able to point towards needing the DePin sensors to protect those data oracles. And so I think we're back to where we started, but now we have the path laid out in front of us and the right network, and kind of a sticky way to get the ball rolling. So I think from here we just got to keep our heads down and keep building.
Yeah. There's as an exciting stage with any DePin company to get to the point where your infrastructure is out there, and like you can see all these devices that are set up. Like I think it's very different to other people who are building. From first day we talk about stable coins, everything's digital. We talk about payments, it's literally everything's digital. Tokenization, you're taking real world things and you're making them digital. DePin kind of like flips it. You're taking something digital and you're making it physical, and you're kind of bringing that into the fold. And it's quite an exciting journey to go on when you start with the idea, the concept, and you start then moving forward brick by brick. And I think it'll be a really exciting endeavor when your devices are out there. And you get to kind of like see that growth of people setting up their devices. It's like, oh, I have my sensor. I'm measuring the temperature of the water on my beach hut. That's here. Or I'm a fishing boat and I've been going around and I've got it going here. So I can be able to create every time I'm going around, I'm picking up the temperature and I'm able to contribute that data. Like, I think it'll be quite exciting as you guys as founders and building the business and the brand continue to grow to be able to then see all of those devices out there in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned before, the 18 satellites that were publicly broadcasting data are going offline. And the idea that in a couple years, as a community, we can just put our own up in space, that's like insane. It's as far as digital as you get. We're taking deep into space. That's where we worked with the UK Space Agency. The exciting thing is that with all these crazy ideas, we've been paired up with the right experts, and everyone is just like, this is possible, this is possible, this is possible. So now it's just about getting the momentum right and executing.
And I think that's super exciting. And what type of support have you found that you have needed? Like when you talk about that founder journey, like what's been some of the biggest problems building out this DePin company?
I think from my perspective, I started this as like this one person kind of, well, I'm just going to have to fix this problem myself, ludicrous idea that like one person can sit there and code it. And, that's very much not true. It really takes the whole community. And that's been what has been awesome about Super Team is bringing in that aspect, the community aspect, helping us work through those sides of things, because Andrew and I can sit and solve problems all day and build. But I think for us, just, really building those muscles to look at the market, how to interact, brand, all of these kind of things that are just really essential to being a founder. That's where the big community support has come in. I think we're in a position where our idea is awesome, and when people get it, everyone wants to get involved. So it's really about leveraging these networks to learn how to communicate that better and figure out where the easy wins along the way are to kind of get the engine running.
Very cool. Is when you then now looking at the climate sphere as a whole, and if we look like a little bit forward, are there any areas of other areas that you can see that there's like real problems in climate that DePin can help solve?
Yeah.
You guys are tackling like surface temperature of the water and how you can be creating that like even like brand relating towards it. So I can imagine over the long run you'll introduce different type of devices and different type of their niches to be able to like how the two dual economy is being able to just kind of continue growing its brand and people are consistently being able to activate and support more climate positive causes. Are there any other areas that you guys see the gap in the market that maybe we'll tackle in a few different years?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really what we've R&D'd and built out is a protocol that can run amongst many different sensors. And we started with the sea surface temperature, but even now we're broadcasting out and hooking into a lot of different systems that already exist. But a really an area we're really interested in is like parametric insurance, which is like probably
Okay.
super dull.
But what is it?
Parametric insurance. So insurance that is basically is underwritten by a secured data point. So let's take Miami, for example. There's a lot of people that just can't get insurance. Like no one is willing to offer them insurance, even if they're willing to pay the top premium. But with this like very high resolution climate data, we can actually figure out like where, like we can give a price to everyone. The price might be too high, but we can also figure out, in very small areas where there is opportunities where it is safe, and that can all be completely data driven. And
Interesting.
that's definitely an area where we're talking with kind of third parties about supplying that and what it would look like to actually, there's some really fun ideas where you can actually have kind of prediction markets that are insurance policies, where and they're like these mechanisms where it kind of clears through the red tape where we're not officially an insurance company, but people can get insurance and it's still like not totally gambling, and finding those sweet spots where like you're in a regulatory gray zone where you can just actually build and go and you're supplying a need to someone who doesn't. I think that's how disruption happens. And I think that there's just an unlimited amount of opportunity with just having a better understanding of climate, whether it's real estate, agriculture, but at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to getting this very tight picture of our climate and the health and sustainability. And unless there is a global trusted system ensuring that, it's never going to happen, because the second we go to war, in Russia, most of the Arctic ground stations stop contributing data to like the pool. So, you just countries have incentives, and rightfully so, to not give other people data at times. But when it comes to the public good side of things, we need redundant systems, and that is an orchestration problem, and that's where blockchain shines.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, like the ability where if we solve the problem of getting the climate data, and you can now have verified, trusted, highly accurate, very like down to the micro quality climate data. There's a lot of things you can build on top of that. Like you talk about there, it's like I wouldn't have thought about the idea you can, like in Miami, it's probably difficult to get home insurance because of the ability to get floods. And if you're able to specifically show, well, actually, no, this little gulf, like, or this little like strip is actually okay because of X, Y, Z. Like there's different gusts of wind here, or there's different like flow of actually this house would be preserved. Maybe its next door neighbor would get hit, but like this would be preserved. And you can then map that out where you can then create just like that bit of like graph where the different premiums are at the different spaces. And you can have like your own unique kind of like price relative to your even directly neighbors. And then you can then get very creative, just saying on like the idea of prediction markets on top of that, where you can then be built into how you can then create an insurance model-esque through that. That sounds pretty exciting. And it all just begins with the data and being able to have like DePin devices spread up so the data collection is like a public, it's like open, and like anyone, when you collect that data, it's all transparent, it's all public, it's all open, no single party owns it. When you own your device, you're contributing that data to everybody, and that creates that better type of future where it's not dependent, as you're saying, when if a country has different political interests, that they will stop contributing, in a way where it's all the public, and we're all humans on this planet, and we all live here. No, we're not moving anytime soon, and we need to be able to make sure that the world that we live in is looked after. And one of the biggest blockers to looking after the planet right now, that probably then isn't being talked about, is we need to have good climate data. And you're saying that these other 18 satellites are going to be turned off soon, and there's a public data that we're losing, and it's now going to go towards the private sources, which creates internal issues and conflicts where a public good is now being provided by private companies with their own agendas and own incentives, which likely will result in the right data not being openly accessed to people. And so to solve this, we need to have a way of collecting this data that's open to the world, and DePin creates that clear solution, because you can be tracking and transparently understanding where that data is coming from, who's providing that data, and you can create incentive mechanisms for people to be able to provide that data. Like one of the really good examples I like for DePin is Hive Mapper, and I like to explain it in Hive Mapper. They basically create Street View maps, and who does that in the world? Google. Google have a 4-year lag on their Street View map because only Google. Whereas Hive Mapper, because they've brought together the world to help collect this data, they have a 2-week lag in their Street View map. And they have this incentive mechanism where you buy their dash cam, put it in your car, and you get rewarded for providing that Street View data. And they can then sell that data to like insurance companies and to different people. So they then share those rewards back to you. And you can get extra rewards if you go and drive somewhere that they haven't mapped before, or if you're in areas where they want it constantly refreshed and there's high demand for that data. And so it's like and it's all built across on the blockchain, this shared database. So it's all permissionless, it's all trustless. You buy the device and it works, and you can build up your account, and it creates now this smooth way that instead of having one company, one private company like Google going around collecting the Street View, anybody with a car can be able to collect the Street View map. And that's why they're actually growing far faster than what Google did at their stage, and why their product now is already superior to what Google have. And it's just getting better and better. And we need to then, what you're pioneering is that within the climate space, and how we're able to collect the climate data so we can protect our planet, and how we can offer new use cases that previously weren't available to people, like we talk about there with home insurance in Miami. And so that's just the start. That's just opening a door towards what is possible. And it starts with being able to have a trustless, permissionless way to collect that climate data.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hive Mapper is another great, like, now is the time for them, and they're proving it's working. And I hope a lot of people see that and pay attention. And I'm definitely not against private companies and private data, but without the core layer you're talking about, none of those companies can be built. We just need that basic public good and trust and understanding of the earth. So
when we then look at like a DePin as well, generally,
Mhm.
are there any other type of industries that you think it's going to be really impactful for?
that DePin just in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gets fuzzy to me where the line of DePin just becomes like decentralized servers and compute. So I try and put it more in the box of like this sensors, these kind of things that are sort of completing a task and just helping securing data and putting it on. But I think the same way we talked about climate and where it is overlapping, it's just, and there's a big area of knowledge in the world that is just like kind of fuzzy truth, where we'll never be able to quantify exactly what it's going to be, because it's sort of an emergent truth within the context of humans. And that probably doesn't make sense, but these are the kind of things that prediction markets are really good because you can just pull people and then the truth emerges. And when we're building, super intelligence, AGI, there's plenty of quantifiable data, but to get those systems really smart, they're going to need insights into these fuzzy truths as well. And being able to feed these fuzzy truths reliably is going to be a massive industry. And again, I guess a simpler way to say it is just like data feeds for general oracles across on-chain systems. And I think that's just agnostic, but I think that there is a clear need there for the future generations of AI to reach kind of a super intelligent level that is going to be dependent on DePin. And again, that's another thing that should accelerate society, having these kind of huge intelligences in our pockets.
Well, when we talk a bit more about that, you go into this idea of what you mentioned of decentralized compute. And there's maybe a good way to think about DePin in like two separate sides of you can have these physical devices, stuff like a Hive Mapper, a Helium router, NCOP sensors, all of these different like physical devices that go into it. But when we talk about decentralized infrastructure, there's also the digital side towards that as well. And that's stuff like compute, where you've got like render network, where you can be able to contribute if you have a spare GPU, just like an old lap computer somewhere, old laptop, you can set that up to be the render network, and you can then be contributing your GPU power to them, so that somebody who maybe doesn't have access to a high quality GPU can access the same benefits of it, which would be for them rendering high quality videos, which is something I absolutely love. Like the idea that I can't afford a high quality computer, but I can still get access to render my high quality videos. And that's just only one tiny slice of it. You're going to be able to apply this to many different aspects of where compute can be used. But the concept of I can't afford it, but I can still access it, that I think is a real like changer for a lot of people in the world.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Render Network. I also run a generative AI startup doing, large scale generative AI content for the immersive industry. And, my apartment is just filled with servers and I can't sleep. It's like, we need them because when projects ramp up, there's just no better option. But, with things like render, that's like, that problem's going to go away soon. And we need more of that. And there is so much unused compute, the ability for people to create compute in places where energy is cheap and clean and share that. We need these systems. We need a new grid. And you're going to get the margins there by decentralizing those systems, where right now so much money is just kept to keep the centralized version running, and not even that well in many cases. Just being able to have trust as an API takes away so much overhead, and DePin is going to be absolutely the unlock there. I just don't, maybe there's another way, but this is just so obvious. It's going to be part of the solution.
And when you talk about like how you can generate the compute in areas with low electricity costs with renewable energy, like I think it's like when you start going into like we should be working as a globe, as a planet, as all humans on this earth, we can all work together to create solutions, and blockchain helps break down those barriers. We've been talking about before in the previous live streams how you can send money to anywhere in the world instantly. These are another type of aspect towards where you can see that same philosophy, where you can be able to access resources from all across the world. And with blockchain, you can build any digital, so accessing that compute from somewhere on the other side of the world that has really good solar panels and is able to then give energy back to the Arctic, where they don't have as many solar panels.
Yeah, and I don't need to know who's running that. I don't need to like care. I don't need to write it's just trusted. They can go, they can find those places, they can set up compute. I can verify the job they're doing is what I need it to be done, and vice versa. They can verify that I'm a client doing a thing that is what they do. And that, doing international business, there's just, it always sucks. So yeah, it could just be like way better.
And when we're now moving into this, like when you talk about AGI and like how we're just being able to improve our AI technologies.
Mhm.
Like when you get to like an artificial general intelligence, it's a lot of compute. You need a lot to be able to power that. And this idea of like spare GPU power that can be activated is going to be a game changer for a lot of people, and it's going to help unlock a lot. Where we're going to need more access to compute faster and quicker than we need this like ability to crowdsource it towards it, because compute's the new commodity, and we need to be able to have like positive ways of generating that and sharing that across the world. And as just mentioning that, it's really important that has to be in a permissionless way where I don't have to trust you in order to receive that information. I know it's good. Similar to how when we talk about climate data before, of you can know that climate data is good because it's come from a verified sensor.
Exactly.
What do you? I guess it's like a bit of a tangent, but I'm just curious.
Mhm.
What's your then thoughts on like how quantum computing will start to change some of this up?
I cannot talk about quantum computing. I don't. I don't know. I know it's spooky. I know that they can do things with it. I know that. I wish Andrew was here because as part of Turbine, he did like his kind of PhD research on making Solana post quantum safe.
Mm.
So he could go on about this. He's up to date with like the actual things, but I kind of
That'll be alpha for everybody on a later stream.
yeah, yeah. But I just think we'll get. It's just more compute. I don't want to look at it any more than that. Uh, it's like I hope we get some big unlocks and like understanding better the world of physics around us. That, but I don't know, dude. Yeah, it's one too far for me.
Because I think there's this like real cool stage I think we're going into in like human history of we have this like huge convergence of these type of technologies
Mhm.
all coming together. And I think what we're all trying to strive for in this like Web3 ecosystem is that it's built in like a global way, it's built in a permissionless, trustless way, it's built in a way in which we don't need to rely on a person to say yes, it just works. And we can all verify, yes, this is all trusted, it all moves forward. And we start bringing in these new technologies, we need to make sure that it can all run smoothly with it, because you've got everything from AI coming in, then you've got the quantum side, you've got the robotics, you've got biotech, like all of these layers of different new technologies are starting to stack up. And a painting we've been trying to like show here across with the Startup Village is this is what the future of the internet starts to look like. And potentially the future of the internet is crowdsourced compute. It's like, and everything's been like brought together by everybody and everyone's helping contribute. You mentioned about Dawn, about being like you can share your extra broadband to your neighbor and you can be able to kind of like distribute that across. Like DePin, I think activates some very, very cool initiatives where what was previously talk about the old version of the grid, you got Fuse Energy doing incredible stuff, being able to create virtual power plants and doing all different types of initiatives utilizing this technology to make infrastructure and those commodities from it more accessible to everybody, and to make it not just accessible within a country but to the entire world.
Yeah, and I think what I keep saying is just like trust as an API. Just whenever I try to communicate to people, because there is so much noise around blockchain, like you have computers that can agree on the same information no matter what. Like that is profound. That gives you trust as an API. I think we really it's what I started off saying with this. But if you're feeding bad things into those systems, they're relatively useless. And I think DePin can really kind of help close that part of the loop. Making that, as you said, bringing the digital to the physical, and closing that gap.
Is there anything that you think are blocking us at the moment? Like what's some of the big things that gets in the way?
I think it's just like any early stage technology. It's just right identifying the right products for where the market's at right now, and that all these ideas we're talking about are great, but at the end of the day, it's like with the climate data, like there's still so much free climate data out there. There's not really the market opportunity, so I think it's going to come. it's inevitable. And every week people are starting to like reach out to me and be like, oh, I understand why this is important now. But looking at things like Hive Mapper, just identifying these like little sweet spots where it's just like a general improvement. It opens up a new door, but it's not really going into direct competition, because centralized systems are still really efficient. And I don't think like corporate structure and capitalism, a lot of what we have is like, it's really easy to look down and put down upon it and be like, everything needs to be decentralized. But just the way that we're able to come together as a world right now and operate at the scales we are is insane. Like the way that we have these corporations that can expand so many nations and give products to so many people, like, is absurd. And I think enough people in the DePin and blockchain space don't fully acknowledge that when they're looking at the products and the things they're making, and trying to work with those people and find the little gaps in between is probably going to be the biggest thing to accelerate, because the core capabilities are here, and now it's, I think, really about finding people who can identify the correct market. And that's what we've what I've been learning personally and going through with NCorp.
No, like it's very important that whenever you are building something, there's also like a why now for the market, and like they then want to be able to tap into this. And I agree, there's a level of you got to be able to work with the large companies who do have a lot of built out structure towards this, because they're the people who can then be able to like roll it, like once it clicks and once it moves, it can get rolled out suddenly across to different places. It takes a while to get to that point where it's like a slowly then suddenly kind of vibe towards it. And you don't necessarily want to be seen. I think that one other thing we've been echoing is we don't want the industry to be seen as like this like revolutionary technology that's gonna absolutely change the world, and it's gonna have impacts like that. But what we want to be more talking about is how it's just a better, faster, cheaper technology. And you want to go to them and say, hey, this actually save your costs by an order of magnitude. And that's going to get their attention.
Yeah, exactly. And they know the problems better than anyone else, because they're operating businesses in the space. So yeah, but I do think it is at that stage where and we're seeing in companies like Hive Mapper and Dawn, the core tech can be built on, so we really just need more people to be digging and finding these early pockets to get it moving to the next stage.
Is there anything that, so outside of what you're already doing with NCorp, maybe anyone has talked about, is there anything that you want to see someone build? Just through as you being doing your market research, seeing where we're at, like, is there something that was like, yeah, like, fuck, that's a good one. Someone needs to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think that it's within this bubble of climate guardianship, and I think that there's like a very kind of blockchain way to talk about it. You have DePin, DeSci, and DeFi, right? And we're trying to do it all, but obviously we can't. We're focusing on one little pillar, but we've identified 20 or 30 different companies within those pillars that are like, someone could go and start and probably raise at least a seed money to explore a little further. But it's within this bridge of collecting the data, organizing it, making it available, and then pulling that into the primitive of our economic systems. Like, that is what we kind of consider climate guardianship. That can be applied to many other industries, but that's what it's going to take. And there's tons of opportunity out there. So, there's many times where we just have to be like, we can't go in that direction because this is the direction we're going in. But damn, I wish I could sit down and start building that. And so, we want and encourage anyone, especially people in the UK. I want to see a more aggressive startup culture. I want to see people at the top universities just like taking gambles and bets and big risks while they're young. The UK government has started to do work to make investment more friendly, but we really need the culture on the ground. That I feel like that's what I'm trying to help contribute as part of Super Team as well. But the ideas are out there. You just need people to go for them. And we're at NCorp, we're happy to sit down with anyone who wants to start that journey and help identify some of those areas that we've come across.
I love that. Like, what was one of the things that helped you kind of like break through that barrier of like not going to a safe, cushiony job, but like going for it?
Yeah, I think, coming from the States, having family in tech, seeing that that's there. I grew up in the woods, climbing, skating, these kind of outcast activities where I never personally really fit into the mold and always had a kind of DIY mentality. So I'm not really sure. I think it's just a byproduct of circumstance and a byproduct of culture, but that's something I think that can be curated and adapted. So I actually spend more of my time trying to get closer to functioning in society than being out on the edge. It's for me, it's like the opposite journey. But yeah, I don't know.
When now, as you start going into the next couple weeks, next couple months, what do you hope to, if we brought you back on over the summer? What would you hope to have been able to do that you can like kind of set in stone now? It's like, yes, this is what we're gonna do.
Well, we're on at DevNet right now. As I said, we're starting to arbitrage and trade climate opportunities in the market. We're about to launch this decentralized prediction market. We're just focusing around a single product, Short Miami, that allows people to kind of take bets on different climate predictions within Miami as a start. We're gonna launch that on the secret phone with the release there. So I think just the goal for the next few months is just get really cash flow positive, proving that with all the work we've done the past 2 years, we can make better climate predictions than anyone else, and that we can make money doing it. And we're hoping that is obvious proof to everyone that these bigger mechanisms can work, that there is some juice here. But the easiest way to do that is just make some money, people pay attention and prove that it works.
Yeah, and then brick by brick, you'll be able to start collecting all of that climate data and being able to make the impact.
Yeah, and we have built these really big data pipelines. We're trying to preserve all this data that's going offline. We had been doing this with NOAA, and then with the administration change, they kind of lost funding and weren't able to work with companies outside the US. And so we're taking a lot of that initiative to our own hands. And I think, we have a fun product that will make money, that will communicate what it's doing, but what is going on underneath the hood is a very serious thing. And, getting opportunities like this to just talk about it is a win. So we keep that going.
Awesome. Well, Lucas, I appreciate you coming on and joining us. This is the DePin day at the London Startup Village.
Yeah.
Was anything that you want to say maybe to any inspiring founders who see that, like, they're thinking about, do I get into building this, or any founders or like, I'm not too sure where I want to build and why they should be building in the DePin space?
No, I don't have any advice. It's the same advice that everyone has. To find something that you can get obsessed with and don't rely on other people to get it going, and then rely on people very heavily to help you once it's time to get going. But thank you, Cap. The past, I don't know, it's been a while now. Super Team has been going. At least I've been here over a year and a half now, I think, and it's been a home base for us. And yeah, I really hope we can continue to grow these organizations together and put London on the map for DePin, for the hub, and get blow out some big companies. So
there we go. Awesome. Well, thank you, Lucas.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise.
And thank you everyone for tuning in. This is the 4th day of the London Build Station, Startup Village.